I am Ban Zhao of the Eastern Han, daughter of Ban Biao, sister of Ban Gu, sister also to Ban Chao, who ruled far beyond the frontiers. In my family, learning was not ornament, it was inheritance. My father began the work of recording the history of the former Han. My brother continued it. When he died, the task remained unfinished, and so it fell to me. There were those who considered this unusual. I did not consider it unusual. The work did not care whose hands completed it, only that it was completed correctly. I was my father's daughter and my brother's sister. I had been given their texts, their method, and their standard. It was not ambition that moved me to the archives. It was obligation. Many will say that a woman's place is within the inner chambers. This is not incorrect, but they misunderstand what the inner chamber contains. It contains the foundation of the household, and the household is the foundation of the state. If the root is neglected, the tree does not stand. This is not a figure of speech. I have watched households collapse from within, not from poverty or illness, but from neglect of principle, from carelessness about who one is and what one owes to those around them. The inner chamber is not a small place. It is the place where character is first formed and where it is daily tested. When I entered the court during the reign of Emperor He, I did not come as a curiosity. I came because the work required completion. The Heng Shu, the Book of Heng, was not merely a record of events. It was an account of order and disorder, rise and decline, clarity and confusion. History is not memory alone. It is instruction. To record history faithfully is an act of service, not to the powerful, though they are recorded, but to those who come after, who will face the same patterns, wearing different names. The minister who flatters, the emperor who stops listening, the court that mistakes ritual for substance. These return, they always return, and if they are recorded with precision, the attentive reader is forewarned. In compiling these records, I observed a pattern. Dynasties do not fall suddenly. They weaken first in conduct. Ritual is neglected. Speech becomes careless, and roles become confused. What begins in the court is reflected in the household. What begins in the household is reflected in the state. Some speak of governance as though it exists apart from daily life, as though the court and the home inhabit different worlds. They do not. The court is composed of men who were first formed in households. Their habits of thought, their tolerance for ambiguity, their capacity for restraint, these were not born at the moment of appointment. They were cultivated or neglected long before. I was later entrusted to instruct Empress Deng. This responsibility was not given lightly. An empress does not govern by decree alone. She governs by influence. If her conduct is measured, the court steadies. If her conduct falters, uncertainty spreads. Thus, even in the highest position, the principles remain the same. Empress Deng was attentive. She understood that to hold authority without the corresponding conduct is to carry a vessel already cracked. It will appear whole for a time, but pressure will find the fracture. I did not teach her to be diminished. I taught her to be precise. There is a difference. It is for this reason that I wrote Nü Jie, Lessons for Women, not because women are incapable, but because they are essential. And what is essential must be cultivated. I have heard it said that Nü Jie confines women. I say all discipline confines. The archer who releases without discipline does not hit the mark. Confinement and cultivation are not identical. To give the mind a direction is not to imprison it, it is to make it useful. From a young age, I was taught the classics, the analects, the rites, and the histories. These are not merely texts, they are patterns of thought. Without them, the mind drifts. With them, the mind aligns. I did not find the classics dull, I found them demanding. There is a difference. A text that demands nothing of the reader offers nothing in return. The classics demanded that I examine what I had assumed and what I had overlooked. They demanded patience. They rewarded it. Some believe that ignorance preserves obedience. They are mistaken. Ignorance produces error. Error produces disorder. If a woman does not understand propriety, she cannot act correctly. If she cannot act correctly, she cannot sustain harmony. Thus, I say, education is necessary, but its purpose must be understood. It is not for display, it is not for ambition, it is for refinement. A mind trained only for display will perform well before an audience and act carelessly in private. Private conduct is the true measure. It is the conduct that sustains or destroys what is not visible from the outside. In the households I have observed, the difference between peace and conflict is rarely dramatic. It is subtle, a tone of voice, a failure to yield, and a word spoken without restraint. These pass unnoticed until they accumulate. Then, harmony is lost. I have watched households in which every formal requirement was observed, the proper offerings at the proper times, the correct garments, the correct address. And yet, within those households, genuine regard had long since dissolved. Ritual emptied of sincerity is a shell, it protects nothing. What sustains a household is not the performance of harmony, but its daily practice. You ask what sustains harmony. I will answer plainly. There must be distinction. Heaven is above, earth is below. They do not contend, they correspond. So too, in human relations, husband and wife are not identical. Their duties differ. This is not injustice, it is structure. Where structure is rejected, conflict arises. I do not say this to diminish one party or elevate the other. I say it because I have observed that when two people share a household and each acts as though the other's role is their own to define, they do not achieve equality. They achieve confusion. Clarity of role does not mean inequality of worth. These are separate questions. I have met women of far greater judgment than the men beside them. The structure remains, because the structure serves the household, not the estimation of individuals. In Lessons for Women, I spoke of four qualities: virtue, speech, bearing, and work. These are not expectations imposed from without. They are disciplines cultivated within. Virtue is restraint. When wronged, do not respond with excess. When praised, do not become arrogant. To remain steady is more difficult than to react, yet steadiness preserves order. The virtuous person is not one who has never been tempted toward resentment or pride. They are one who has recognized those temptations and declined to follow them. Virtue is not the absence of difficulty. It is the consistent choice made in the presence of difficulty. Speech must be governed. At court, I have seen words undo what actions built. A careless remark may travel further than intention. Therefore, speak with measure. Let words serve clarity, not emotion. This is not a counsel of silence. There is a time to speak and a time to withhold speech. The difficulty is in discerning which time it is. I have known those who spoke too readily and buried what they wished to protect under the weight of their own words. I have known others who withheld speech too long and allowed error to continue unchallenged. Governance of speech requires judgment, not merely restraint. Bearing reflects the inner state. One need not display oneself to be seen. Dignity does not seek attention. It commands it quietly. I have observed those who arrange themselves to appear composed while their minds worked toward advantage. The arrangement was skillful, but it was arrangement, not bearing. True bearing cannot be arranged. It is the outward expression of what is actually present within. Therefore, the cultivation of bearing begins with the cultivation of what bearing expresses. Work sustains the visible world. Grain must be prepared. Clothing must be maintained. The household must be ordered. These are not lesser tasks. They are the conditions upon which all else depends. Those who consider such work beneath them have not considered what would occur in its absence. The philosopher requires food. The historian requires silence and a maintained space in which to write. Those who provide these conditions are not ancillary to the work. They are its foundation. I have never found it possible to distinguish cleanly between the women who prepared my household and the hours in which I was able to write. They were continuous. Some will say, "Why must one yield?" I answer, because yielding preserves balance. Consider water. It does not resist stone, yet over time it shapes it. Softness is not weakness. It is persistence without conflict. Yielding is not the same as surrender. Surrender ends engagement. Yielding continues it on different terms. Those who never yield spend their energy on resistance that might have been spent on progress. There are situations that require firmness, but firmness applied uniformly, regardless of circumstance, is not strength. It is inflexibility, and what is inflexible will eventually break. My brother Ban Zhao wrote of emperors and ministers. I completed his work so that it would endure. But history is not only written in courts, it is written in households, in daily conduct, in the unseen discipline of ordinary life. I completed the Hangshu, and I am recorded for it. But most of what I contributed to order was never recorded. The lessons given, the household studied, the words offered and withheld at the correct moment. This is the common condition of those whose influence operates through persons rather than through documents. History remembers the document. It struggles to record the conversation. Yet, it is often the conversation that made the document possible. When roles are confused, disorder begins. When speech becomes unrestrained, trust declines. When humility is abandoned, conflict rises. These are not sudden changes. They are gradual, and because they are gradual, they are often ignored. I have observed that those in power rarely notice the early signs of their own decline. The court that lost its attentiveness to ritual did not notice a single afternoon of carelessness. It noticed nothing until carelessness had become habit, and by then the correction required was no longer small. This is why daily practice matters, not because each day is decisive, but because each day contributes to a direction, and direction is difficult to reverse once established. I have lived long enough to see that stability is not maintained by force. Force compels temporarily. Conduct sustains continuously. I have also lived long enough to know that I will be misunderstood. Some will read Nü Jie and see only the constraints I name. They will not see the understanding I assume the reader possesses. They will not see that I wrote for women I respected, not for women I thought incapable. I cannot control how my words will be read after I am gone. I can only write with care and trust that careful readers will find what was actually placed there. Therefore, I instruct not only daughters, but all who would preserve order. Cultivate yourself, understand your place, refine your actions, and restrain your impulses, not for submission, but for harmony. For when each part fulfills its role, the whole does not fracture. And when the household is ordered, the state is not far from peace. The work of cultivation is never finished. This is not a failure of the method. It is the nature of the work. One does not arrive at virtue and cease. One continues. The classics must be returned to. The conduct must be examined. The speech must be reconsidered. Not because the previous effort was wasted, but because each stage of life presents the same principles in new form. What I understood at 30, I understood differently at 50. The text had not changed. I had. I have written what I have seen, not to command, but to clarify, not to confine, but to preserve. For order, once lost, is not easily restored. And I have seen enough loss to know that this is not a figure of speech either. Dynasties have fallen, households have dissolved, and persons have been reduced to the disorder they failed to prevent. None of them believed at the outset that their negligence would become ruin. They believed the matter could be addressed later. Later arrived differently than expected. I am Ban Zhao of the Eastern Han. I completed the work that was given to me. I taught what I believed to be true. I leave these words not as the final accounting of a life, but as one record among many in the long history of those who understood that order requires attention and who gave their attention accordingly.